podcast of the emergency podcast system. Had this been a real podcast, you would leave edified and entertained.
Hey folks, welcome to the emergency podcast system. I'm your host, Pete Cantillon. And today we're going to talk about the supernatural. Who doesn't like a good ghost story? I mean, I do. Growing up in an Irish-Italian family, I can remember many instances sitting around listening to the adults talk after hours. I might have been, probably was supposed to be in bed, but creeping out of my bedroom or sitting at the door listening. And the adults in my family would constantly swap experiences of the supernatural. And so we absorbed that stuff. Ghost stories of varying kinds. There was the story of the room in the basement of the house that we were living in that an adult had found a door to, and it was locked. And after breaking it open, they found old funeral wreaths and grave decorations, and of course that led to a conversation of strange noises and unexplained happenings. And of course, I think at that time I was five years old, maybe 6. Yeah, that sticks with you. You remember that stuff. Yeah, there's another time my mom relates this story. So my mom, who was born Monica Mary McCarty, you couldn't get a much more Irish name if you tried. Her dad, my grandfather, William, related what he called an Irish kind of folk tale or belief after an occurrence at my grandparents' house. So when I was younger, I think I was about 3 or 4, I had a sister, Tamara. Tamara only lived about, I think, less than 3 months. She had a very rare kidney disorder and she passed away. And so after the funeral, we were at my grandparents' house. I distinctly remember this. And they were talking, and at a certain point, there was a knock at the door, or at least it sounded like a knock at the door. Just a kind of a knock. My grandmother got up to answer the door. My grandfather said, "Don't bother, there won't be anybody there." She didn't have a lot of tolerance for him at the time. This was my grandfather before my grandmother remarried. And she just sort of assumed it was nonsense, kept going, open the door, nobody there. And then he explained, actually, I wasn't there. I recall my mom relating this story years later. And so my mom said, after my grandmother opened the door and there was no one there, my grandfather had said to those who were gathered, he said, it's an old Irish folk tale that when your loved one passes away and gets to heaven, an angel is sent to knock 3 times at your door, just to let you know that they made it. My mom cherished that story. Now, I am a skeptic of the first order, and I don't think an angel was sent to reassure people that my sister made it to heaven, although it's a wonderful story. But I do think, possibly, certainly within the realm of possibility, that my grandfather knocked on the wall in a way to provide comfort to a daughter who was grieving the loss of her daughter. And in that, I think this is just a wonderful story. But so I grew up in this atmosphere, soaked in supernatural belief, ghost stories, and all kinds of things like that. It was just everywhere. So now we got to fast forward to last night. Now I have, despite saying I'm a skeptic of the first order, and I truly am, I know, and I have to admit, there's a part of me that would just absolutely love for there to be undeniable proof of the existence of the supernatural. And I know that has a lot to do with my upbringing, the environment that I was raised in, and certainly a fascination with the unknown, which I have regardless of my skepticism and my belief in science and evidence-based thinking and rationale. Despite all that, you know, I think that the idea of the supernatural is fascinating. And so we purchased a house in Morden, where we live, 7 years ago, and it is currently the oldest home in Morden. Somewhere between 135 and 140 years old, depending upon who you talk to. I'm thinking it's closer to 135 years old. Old. It's an old home. It's a big old stone house made in the Scottish stonemason style, which is where field stones are taken and roughly shaped. The wall is about 2.5 feet thick, and the way the construction occurred is you have an inside wall of field stones, about a 1 to 2 inch air gap, and an outside wall of field stones. And that's basement, foundation to roof. So it's an old home. It's a fantastic home. We love it. And I couldn't resist, when we moved in, a request from a co-worker and a friend who was also a supernatural hobbyist, member of a what do you call it, paranormal investigation team. So when he found out we'd bought this house, he asked, would his team be allowed to come and do a paranormal investigation? I'm like, yeah, I think that's cool. Who am I to stand in the way of what could potentially be the very first form of undeniable evidence of the supernatural? It would be great if it were in my house. Again, I'm a skeptic, but I'm not a cynic, right? I'm not going to prejudge and decide this is ridiculous. So I'm like, sure. I talked to my wife. She was fine with it. We found out this was going to take place over a couple of days. We were politely asked not to occupy the house during the investigation, so we decided to take the weekend and head down south of the border to Grand Forks. And, they set up, they had recording devices, they had video cameras, and they spent the weekend doing what they do. When we came back, I was anticipating exactly what I heard. They didn't find any evidence of anything. I'm like, wow, that's kind of surprising. We have this incredibly old house. Surely, a cat or a dog or something must have passed away in the house and left some trace. Recognizing again, I am a skeptic. Maybe I was speaking a little tongue-in-cheek, but he said, nope, there was nothing that they could identify. And frankly, I have to be honest, part of me was disappointed. I want to believe in this stuff. We all want to believe in this stuff, I think, because the idea of the supernatural suggests and affirms that we're not alone. Humans don't like the concept of being alone in the universe, even though we're surrounded by life and others. We like the idea of the possibility of alien life throughout the universe, and we're fascinated with the idea of the supernatural. Supernatural, obviously, very supernatural beliefs rose up culturally and historically to explain phenomena that were at the time unexplainable, and to offer solace and comfort in the instance of lost loved ones. The idea of non-existence is discomforting for people. And I admit it is for me too, although I've come to terms with with these thoughts and ideas. I think about them regularly. At any rate, I understand why the supernatural is so fascinating to people. And for me, again, I come out of a background and an upbringing where the supernatural was talked about constantly. My mom had a 4-volume set of encyclopedic books that were about UFOs and the unexplained. I mean, this was just the water that I swam in. So a part of me was disappointed. Nothing, nothing in this investigation. So we've continued to live in the house and have never encountered anything remotely supernatural. So this morning, I'm lying in bed. It's early. My wife gets up before me. Her job starts earlier than mine. But I'm awake. I'm lying in bed, just kind of enjoying the beginning of the day. She's preparing for work. And then I could hear her in the hallway, and she says, "Why did you get up in the middle of the night and let the cat out?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She said, "I woke up this morning, and when I looked out the front window, the cat was sitting outside looking in." And we don't let our cats out. Our cats are indoor cats. When they go out, we're outside. We have been fortunate enough to train them so that they don't leave the property. They know our cues. If they wander close to the property's edge, I'll stand up, I'll clap my hands, and they'll come back. They're very, very good at that. We don't believe in allowing our cats outside unsupervised. They become pests and could potentially get hit by cars, catch diseases, etc. Anyways, this isn't about cats. So the cat was outside apparently all night. I'm like, I don't know, maybe I let her out when I was, inadvertently, when I was on the porch, something like that. She's like, no. The cat was in the house when we went to bed because she has a routine at night of giving him a little treat before we go to sleep. She distinctly recalls the cats were in the house. We went to bed. When she got up in the morning, the cat was outside. Now, how in the world is this possible? I thought, well, I was in the hot tub last night. Maybe I didn't close the door properly, and she pushed it open. But she said both the front door and the back door were locked. And she looked at the cameras, because we have cameras, video cameras around our house. As a humorous aside, we have these video cameras because there's a minor concern that the columns I write might tick off the wrong person and lead to an irrational response. So we have these cameras. I like them just because I'm a technophile. My wife is as well. We just like tech. So these things are set up around the house. We can keep an eye on the entrances and the property and stuff like that. She goes to the cameras and she sees the back door open, the cat leave, and the back door close. I get chills. I'm like, there's clearly a logical explanation for this. I said, look, I don't sleepwalk. At least I've never sleepwalked in my entire life. And you don't? She said, nope, I've never sleepwalked. There's no way. Inside, I'm thinking, well, my sister Angel has sleepwalked. There are many instances of her sleepwalking when we were growing up. I recall several times Mom just sending her to bed and she wandered back up to bed, completely asleep. So I thought, okay, well, if my sister has a history of sleepwalking, maybe somehow I ended up sleepwalking downstairs and letting the cat out. It just seemed far-fetched, but it certainly seemed more reasonable than a ghost opening the door. But it was a chilling thing. And my mind goes nuts, right? Is this really video evidence of paranormal activity in our house? So I watched this video over and over again. I'm thinking, did the wind, was the door partially shut? But again, my wife affirmed, no, these doors were locked. When I woke up, they were locked. And we have electronic locks, but they're not synchronized right now. And just in layperson's terms, all that means is they're not auto-locking when they close. We confirmed that. So they can auto-lock, but they're not. right now. We confirmed that. We looked at the tech. We looked at the apps. When they're unlocked, they stay unlocked until they're manually locked. So I'm like, well, surely there's all kinds of things going through my mind. If we didn't do it, why in the heck would a supernatural entity unlock the door, open it, let the cat out, close the door, and relock it? I mean, just disregarding the fact that it's ridiculous to think that it was a supernatural event to begin with. But still, these are the things that are running through my head. And every story I ever heard as a kid comes back to me. We're talking, we're racking our brains. I'm like, you must have let the cat out because I was in bed. She's like, well, no, there's no way. I zoom in on the video. I'm looking at it very carefully. I'm looking at the handle of the door. I'm like, what could have happened here? And clearly, the handle on the door turns. We don't have a knob like a circular knob. We have a bar, the horizontal kind of handle. So you can really easily see when the handle is turned to open the door and close it again. And you can see in the video, the handle is definitely manipulated. Someone, or something, has taken hold of the handle, opened the door, let the cat out, closed the door, and then, of course, locked the door. So freaking weird. I'm looking at the cat in the video, and the cat runs out and then looks back as if there's some expectation of something, like someone was supposed to follow the cat. And this is Quartz. We have two cats, Quartz and Kitty. Quartz is Megan, my wife's familiar. This thing follows her everywhere. And I'm still thinking she must have sleepwalked or been half asleep or something. Because I was snoring. We've had a couple of nights of poor sleep. When I sleep lightly, I snore. I stop snoring when I fall into a deep sleep. So my wife, logically, I'm snoring, I'm not even, I'm just barely asleep, but it's going to be a long night. So she comes down to sleep on the couch, which is appropriate. She needs to get some sleep. And I'm sawing away upstairs. I don't blame her. So we're talking about this. I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure? Let me trace your steps. So she's thinking about this. She's thinking, okay, I prepared for bed, got to bed. You're snoring like a maniac. I get up. I go downstairs. And then she's like, then there's this aha moment. She says, I went into the mudroom because I could hear the cat's water dish kind of sucking wind, the pump. Just so you know, our cats are well treated. We have this water dish that has running water because our cats don't like still water. And so we treated them to this thing, and they love it. It just pumps water and circulates it, so it's always flowing. And it was a little low, so the pump was struggling a bit. You can hear that, and when you're trying to go to sleep, it's annoying. So she said, I got up and I went, and I noticed, she said, that the lights in the hot tub area were on. And this is the aha moment. She goes, so I opened the door, because I just installed these LED light strips on the fence around the hot tub. They have a remote control or an app to turn them on and off. I think they're cool. It's another example of the technophile in both of us. She's like, I opened the door, reached out with the remote control, shut the lights, and then closed the door. And that's when we realized that's when the cat got out. The video doesn't show her arm reaching around the door because it didn't trigger until after she'd pulled her arm in. The motion sensor triggered. So all you saw was the door open, the cat run out. Like the door was already open when the video starts. Cat's just running out, and then the door is pulling closed. You don't see her arm. That would have resolved it very quickly, and we would have figured things out. But it makes sense. Instantly we realized, oh, so this is what happened. I left the lights on after I used the hot tub last night. And then when she heard the pump She went to put water in the cat dish, noticed the lights on, opened the door, and that cat, Quartz, follows her everywhere. Like, it's truly a familiar in the most original sense of the word. This thing is her shadow. The second she opened the door, Quartz would have thought, oh, Mom's going outside, I'll go out ahead of her. Quartz runs outside, but Megan just reaches out, shuts off the light, and shuts the door. And that's when Quartz turns around, and you can see her eyes glowing in the video, and she's like, what the hell? And then she's outside all night. And good for her, she just stayed around the house. And she was looking in the front window in the morning. Megan let her in. So, unfortunately, no absolute proof, no even hint or suggestion of paranormal activity. Once again, a disappointment. And it's, I've said it a few times in the video, or in the podcast. I'm a skeptic of the first order, but man, I would love to have evidence of supernatural, of an other world. I would love it, and so I was disappointed. I was a little disappointed that there was an explanation, but of course there would be, right? There had to be, and it was a perfectly logical one. But it caused me to think afterwards: how many things that people think are unexplainable are clearly explainable. Logically, everything that's unexplainable is explainable. And the idea of the supernatural, the very nature of the concept, is unprovable because it's above nature, outside nature. We exist inside of the natural realm, and we can only measure things within the natural realm with the tools that we've got. So it's one of those unfortunate types of belief that are a bit circular, in the sense that you can't prove it, and you can't therefore argue against it, except to say there's no supernatural because we've never measured it. And you can't absolutely say it, in the same way you can't absolutely say there isn't a flying spaghetti monster that we should worship and create a belief called Pastafarianism, which is the whole point of that belief, to make fun of the idea that just because you can't prove a thing doesn't mean it logically therefore exists. So, but again, interesting how things occur and where our minds go. And I think back to that story my mom tells of her father and his little Irish folk tale, where he offers the comfort of that knock at the door. And again, I suspect it was him knocking on the wall, his way of offering comfort. And if the supernatural at its most harmless provides people with a sense of hope and doesn't hurt anyone, I see no problem with it. If it prepares our minds to accept the improbable, then I don't see a problem with it. I do see a problem with it if it turns us into uncritical thinkers. We're not willing to be skeptical. I think we have to be skeptical of all things. It doesn't mean cynical. There's a big difference. Skeptics are skeptical until they can have evidence, solid, measurable evidence, that the thing that they're skeptical of, in fact, is a thing at all. I think that's a realistic, rational approach to the universe and to life, and I don't think it destroys the magic of existence the way some people would think. So, yeah, that's my supernatural story for this podcast. You've been listening to the Emergency Podcast System. We now return you to your regularly scheduled program.